The Douglas TBD-1 Devastator was already too old for torpedo attack by 1942. It had entered service in 1937 as the United States Navy's first all-metal monoplane torpedo bomber, but with a Mark 13 torpedo, its cruising speed was only 128 knots, and its combat radius was only a little over 200 miles. Midway exposed that weakness in the worst possible way. American torpedo squadrons lost 42 aircraft, 99 aircrew were killed, and only 3 men survived. The Devastator still forced Japanese fighters down low. It also proved in one battle that its time was over. The Brewster F-2A3 Buffalo reached 1942 carrying more weight than value. It mattered in 1937 because it was the United States Navy's first monoplane fighter. By Midway, that milestone meant nothing. VMF 221 launched 20 Buffaloes and 7 Wildcats. 13 Buffaloes were listed missing, and 5 more were damaged beyond repair. Against Mitsubishi, a 6 M0s, the F-2A3 had lost the climb, agility, and margin a frontline fighter needed. Its defenders still point to poor tactics and bad positioning. The record still says the aircraft had already fallen behind the war it was trying to fight. The Douglas A-24 Banshee carried the dive bomber idea into the Pacific without carrying the survivability the Pacific demanded. On July 26, 1942, 7 A-24s attacked a Japanese convoy off Buna. 5 were shot down, a 6th was damaged so badly it never reached base, and only 1 aircraft survived the strike. The warning signs had already appeared in Java. 15 repaired. A 24s arrived there on February 17, 1942, and accidents plus maintenance problems cut that down to 7 combat-ready aircraft almost immediately. Crews then fought without armor, without self-sealing fuel tanks, and without fighter cover. The Vought SB-2U-3 Vindicator was a transition aircraft forced to fight after the transition had ended. Its prototype first flew on January 4, 1936, and as the Navy's first monoplane scout bomber, it did mark real progress, about 45 miles per hour faster than the biplanes it replaced. Then the war outran it. Across all variants, only 169 were built. The final SB-2U-3 added fuel and armor, gained weight, and lost performance. At Midway, Marine crews were left with an aircraft too fragile for steep dive bombing, which is how it ended up with the nickname Wind Indicator. The Brewster SB-2A4 Buccaneer was finished before combat ever had the chance to finish it. It was overweight, underpowered, and lacking maneuverability. For a carrier scout bomber, that combination already kills confidence. The harder fact is what never happened. The SB-2A never served in combat as an operational United States Navy aircraft in World War II. Some aircraft earned their bad reputation by being shot down in public. The Buccaneer earned it by losing evaluations, comparisons, and relevance. Once better aircraft were available, nobody wanted to spend combat risk trying to rescue this one. The Curtiss SO-3C1 Seamew was supposed to replace older shipboard float planes. It ended up giving the fleet a reason to keep older float planes in service. The most accurate judgment on the type stayed simple. The SO-3C never panned out. Wartime Navy imagery shows Seamews operating alongside Vought OS-2U Kingfishers, and fleet histories record older float planes returning to jobs the Curtiss design was supposed to take over. That is a quiet kind of failure, but it is still failure. A replacement aircraft is supposed to simplify the fleet. The Seamew complicated it, and crews kept trusting the older answer. The Bell P-59B Airacomet opened the American jet age and still failed as a wartime fighter. It gave the United States Army Air Forces jet training, jet experience, and technical data that mattered later. It also never saw combat. Bell built only 50 production P-59A and P-59B aircraft, and the airplane's own numbers explain why. Maximum speed was 450 miles per hour, but the engines produced too little thrust for a heavy conventional airframe. That left the Airacomet in the worst possible place. Historically important, operationally disappointing. The United States learned from it. The United States did not need it in combat. The Fisher P-75A Eagle spent too much of the war changing jobs. It began as an emergency interceptor, shifted toward long-range escort, and never did either job well enough to survive. Flight tests in late 1943 showed unsatisfactory performance in the first 2 XP-75s. The shortcut behind the project, building a fighter from borrowed components to save time, had to be dropped. Then the war moved faster than the program. By fall 1944, the Army Air Forces already had the P-51 Mustang and P-47 Thunderbolt covering the real escort mission. So the order for 2,500 P-75As was canceled. Only 8 XP-75s and 6 P-75As were built. The Consolidated B-32 Dominator was built in case the B-29 failed. The B-29 did not fail, and that stripped most of the B-32's reason to exist. The program was real, expensive, and industrially serious, but only 118 aircraft were produced. Only 15 flew combat missions, and the type served with just one bomber squadron before the war ended. Those numbers are tiny for a 4-engine strategic bomber. The B-32 reached combat late enough to become a footnote instead of a solution. It did not disappear because it was imaginary. It disappeared because timing turned a backup program into a marginal one. The Consolidated TBY-2 Sea Wolf lost its place before it reached the fleet in useful numbers. Naval records state that Vought built the prototype. Consolidated built 180 production aircraft, and the Sea Wolf never served operationally. That pair of facts says almost everything. This was not another Devastator case where combat exposed an aging design. The TBY was beaten by delay, timing, and redundancy. By the time deliveries finally moved, the Grumman Avenger had already locked down the torpedo bomber role across the Navy. American aircraft failures in World War II often died in replacement, timing, and a system that moved on before the airplane could matter. German failures looked harsher, more chaotic, and much closer to total collapse. So click into the next video and keep watching.